today's Looking Ahead 2023, a World Insight Special. Fears of a looming global recession, but odds of recovery are better, China going all out with an economic rebound. How big of a difference would China make? Answers from the first Deputy Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Gita Gopinath. And we'll hear from Raymund Chao, PwC's Asia Pacific and China Chairman, about how the global business community feels about China's growth prospects.
Hello, I'm Tian Wei, and welcome to our special program. It's time to answer on the sideline of the World Economic Forum 2023. One of the most important tasks for the participants of the World Economic Forum every time is to test and check the temperature of the global economy. On that, I've been talking to several voices coming from both Asia and the world. Let's hear some of them. First, my interview with the first Deputy Managing Director of the IMF. Gita, what a pleasure to see you here at the World Economic Forum.
Hi, Wei. It's a pleasure to join you.
Earlier, last year, there were some predictions coming from IMF suggesting 1/3 of the global economies might be having the danger of running into the possibility of recession. But now, I know things have been evolving. What is your latest assessment?
So in October, Wei, what we had said was that 1/3 of the world would likely be in recession either in 22 or in 23. So we're going to have new numbers come out at the end of January. They will actually be in the ballpark. The overall numbers will be in the ballpark of what we had put out in October. But several things have changed since October, which is that we had better than expected growth, for instance, in the US and in Europe. In the case of China, of course, the last quarter of the year was tough because we had the big surge in infections and you had the restrictions that were put in place. But now the country has moved decisively away from zero COVID. We're seeing cases going up, and of course that there is the consequences of that. But as the wave subsides, we expect China's economy to rebound relatively quickly this year.
What about the relatively quickly you are describing? Exactly what you meant.
So I think the first quarter of this year, you would have the consequences of COVID running through the economy. But then the expectation is that the infections will die out, people will return much more to economic activity, mobility will go up, consumption spending will recover some more, and so then we would see that return in growth. But that said, there is the other aspect which also matters for China's growth prospects, which is the property sector. It's a very important part of China's economy. There is stress in that sector, and the government has taken a lot of concrete actions to deal with it, but still, investment is weak, and that weakness will affect the growth numbers.
You probably heard from the Vice Premier talking about the commitments that China is making and has been making. In his words, it seems to come out very strongly about economic development remains the key goal of China, the most important goal, and also reform and opening up. It's not a political slogan, but rather a commitment to show what China is thinking through right now. So Gita, on this, how much do you see official recognition of some of the important principles that China has been holding on to for the past 4 decades now could have an impact on economic growth or others' confidence about China?
The remarks of the Vice Premier very welcome. I think it's given a lot of positive sentiment also in Davos about China returning back to the global economy, reconnecting back strongly. We will, of course, wait and see what exactly will those actions be and what will be announced. But those are very hopeful signs.
He talked about the property market, of course, and also the financial support for the property market. He also talked about the entrepreneurship, how it should be respected everywhere in the world. And there are a list of other things that he touched on, especially also on the structural reforms and better quality, China's way of modernization. Now, to you, those seem to be, phrases with Chinese characteristics. But to you, what really matters now, you see, with China coming to seek once again as the engine of the global growth?
So firstly, I think it's very important that we see China in these kinds of conferences and meetings in person as opposed to on screen. I think that makes a big difference.
I haven't seen you for about 5 years, I think.
Yes, indeed. I think that makes a big difference for diplomacy also, given the importance of China on the global stage. We've been of the view that Chinese growth needs to move to be more consumption-driven as opposed to investment-driven. And if we see that happening, that will be a positive sign. Again, a more level playing field for state-owned enterprises and for the private sector. I mean, again, the Vice Premier made several very positive comments in that direction.
Straightforward way.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what about the economy in the U.S.? You earlier warned in some of your articles that it's still too early for the Federal Reserve to claim quote-unquote successful. Now, what about your assessment now, and what do you see are the major challenges for the U.S. economy?
So we are seeing inflation coming down. We think headline inflation has likely peaked. Now, core inflation, which is the headline inflation excluding energy and food, that has also been coming down, and we saw some moderation in wage growth. So I think the inflation readings in the last couple of months have provided some hope that we may be durably bringing inflation down, but I would wait for another 2-3 months of data before one can feel really sure that this will be the case. So our advice to the Federal Reserve remains that you should stay the course on monetary policy, keep it restrictive to bring inflation down durably.
Earlier last year, at the end of it, we saw the G20 summit and also the APEC economic leaders meeting. There are some consensus being reached then, but of course we all know words translating into action could be another different thing. So from your observation, what about those consensus to the IMF? What are the most important ones?
I think it was very heartening to see the meeting between President Biden and President Xi Jinping at the Leaders Summit in November, at the G20 Leaders Summit. I think that was, for all of the delegations around there, it was a bit of a positive sentiment, because what it meant was that, you have to put a floor on that relationship. You can't afford it to completely unravel. These are the two largest economies of the world. It matters for the rest of the world if they work together or if they don't work together. So I think that from the IMF's perspective, it is very heartening to see that collaboration happen. We need, China to play a very important role when it comes to global trade, reform of the WTO, when it comes to debt and debt resolution, climate. It has a very important role to play, and providing that collaborative spirit, I think, is very important.
What about Europe? Of course, we are seeing that Europe is having more of its own identity in a way, and more in urgency of trying to come up with solutions of problems of their own. So how do you see the role of European economies and the state of it?
So Europe got hit very hard by the war, especially because of the big rise in gas prices, and countries that were dependent on it, energy costs went up. So that had a very big negative effect on the economy. That said, thanks to the milder winter, and also because they were very good about getting energy from other parts of the world, they have a good amount of storage of gas right now. So I think that the worst that we might have worried about has receded. Uncertainty remains, risk remains, but again, we were surprised somewhat positively because of these outcomes on how the European economy is doing.
I always wonder, as an economist like you working for the IMF, a lot of people are listening to your words very carefully, and they're planning their life in a way, your economy according to what you have in your mind. But it is such a transition from a few years ago when we were still talking about globalization. And we were not seeing a very fragmented world, even though there are differences as always, to now it's a very different world, apparently.
Yes.
And we don't know where it's heading for. So how do you see your research amid all these uncertainties?
Everybody's more concerned about economic security and national security concerns. You do have rising tensions between the US and China that has grown over the last 3-4 years. All of this is making us worry about the world fragmenting and decoupling. And we know that's going to be very costly if that happens. Now, it's important for countries to diversify where they buy from. it's important for countries to have more supply chain resilience. I think that's absolutely the case. National security is important. But the risk is every country decides that they're going to do all their production at home and disengage from the world. And we just know that that then will put more cost pressures on households and on firms and will be a net negative for the global economy.
Yeah. Another question about China, if I can. The confidence for domestic consumption is going to be very crucial for China, particularly if China wants to have its own structural reform, so to speak, that is not relying on exports but more on domestic consumption. Do you see in that regard there are rising certainties that Chinese consumers might be more interested in consuming and not blindly consuming? I know you've been away from China for 3 years, but I know you're doing constant research about the economy.
Yes, no, we pay very close attention to China. So indeed, consumption growth, private sector consumption growth has not recovered fully. It hasn't come back in the strength we would have liked to see. You know, the reopening will help, but we've also been of the view that it's important to have stronger social safety nets in China, because one of the reasons savings rates are so high is because you don't have that safety net. And so, I mean, our advice has been that maybe there could be more scope for fiscal policy to be used for social safety nets as opposed to just investment and infrastructure.
Once again, I want to have a question about the U.S. as well. The U.S. dollar has been the dominating currency in our world. There are a lot of questions and debates about whether that should still be the way. Of course, at this moment, the reality shows it is still. So how do you see, as an economist, the nature of these debates and where is it heading for?
I mean, there is a reason why certain currencies become dominant currencies. We've had this historically, right? Before the world wars, it was the British pound. After the world wars, it's the US dollar. The strength of the institutions, the strength of monetary policy making, the strength of fiscal policy making, the trust in the institutions is absolutely critical to whether a currency becomes a major currency in the global economy. And there are what we call network effects, which is that it helps if all of us are using sometimes the same currency, right? So there is value to that. And the dollar plays a very important role at this point. I know that in the middle of last year, there was this concern that the dollar was appreciating so strongly relative to other currencies that that could have negative consequences for other parts of the world. There is some of that, but you know, the last couple of months, the dollar has depreciated by around 10% on average. So it depends upon, you know, what's happening in the rest of the world. It depends. You know, the Fed has raised interest rates quite a bit and will likely do some more, but not at the same pace.
Gita, what a pleasure to see you once again. All the best.
Thank you.
You're watching It's Time to Answer, our special program on the 2023 World Economic Forum. Coming up, we'll be hearing from Raymund Chao, PwC China's Asia Pacific and China Chairman, about how the global business community feel about China's growth prospects.
Because the way we are organized and the way our big domestic market, when the confidence is back, we really move very quickly.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
When the Swiss Alps long for more winter snow, when economic recession looms over the world, when geopolitics intrudes into almost everybody's life, it is time to ask the question: how can a divided world learn to work together? As the World Economic Forum holds its annual meeting, participants gather in the small town in Davos. So join me to find out how to cooperate in a fragmented world. After all, it is time for all of us to answer that question. You are watching World Insight, our special program on the 2023 World Economic Forum in Davos. I'm Tian Wei. Business executives from the world's largest companies have gathered in Davos to discuss economic recovery after the pandemic. As the second largest economy in the world, China's economic performance will be particularly important. I talked to Raymund Chao, PwC China's Asia Pacific and China chairman, about how the global business community feel about China's growth prospect. Raymund, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, Chinese economy, according to some, 5% to 5.5% growth rate for the year 2023. The latter half of the year seemed to be better. Yep. Now, what are you hearing from your clients and friends here at the World Economic Forum about China's growth?
Great question, and it's great to be here, to be honest. It's been 3 years. We do need to reconnect the business community.
Shake hands on that.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, my clients, the people I met with here, they're so enthusiastic to meet with us, to talk to us. They only get the media, and sometimes the media misrepresent the situation. And so they really want to talk to someone from China. And so my clients were great. I mean, I've been having meetings, every half an hour. I've been seeing so many people. But it's great to meet with them. And I feel really positive, once I've met with them. I think before, over the last little while, there's a fair bit of pessimism in terms of where the economy is. We've had a lot of disruptions, with the pandemic specifically, and everything else around the world. So there's a fair bit of pessimism in terms of what's going to happen over the next 12 months. In fact, I'll share with you at PwC, we just conducted a global CEO survey covering 4,000 plus CEOs across the world, including about 1,600 in Asia Pacific,
right,
and including a fair number in China as well. And the overall theme, unfortunately, was a fair bit of pessimism in terms of looking at economic growth over the next 12 months. And in fact, it's an 180 degrees change from prior year. So the number was something over 70% of the CEOs were fairly pessimistic in terms of expecting growth is going to drop.
What was your first reaction looking at that number?
To be honest, I think given the all the disruptions that we've seen, there's a fair bit of uncertainties. And I think with China coming out and changing the COVID policy and focusing on the economy and growth, and particularly with Vice Premier Liu's speech, I think it gave a lot of confidence, and we do need to build that confidence in the market.
Among the points that he delivered, what are the most important to you and your clients?
Open. Clearly, China is focused on quality growth, and China will continue to open, and China is going to be very focused on economic activities, economic growth. Those are very, very good, encouraging remarks for the business community, clearly. And so I'm a little bit more optimistic at this point than I was before, to be honest.
Good I see you now.
Yeah. But we still have to go through, we're just coming out of the pandemic, and so there'll be a period of time to settle down. But a lot of people are thinking about after the first quarter into the second quarter and into the second half, you hopefully see consumer confidence coming back, the investment community coming back,
right,
and hopefully you'll see a sharp rebound of activities.
One of the things probably from outside the region might not necessarily have access to know, but you know it very well, Raymund, about the resilience of Chinese society, organization, and companies as well, entrepreneurs. You work with them on a daily basis. So describe that to us about what actually are they thinking? Do they see a sustainable path for growth? How did they go through the difficult years as many others in different parts of the world?
It has been very difficult for the business community, no doubt. But in terms of resilience, I think we've all seen, in 2020 and how quickly China rebounded in 2021. Now, unfortunately, 2022 has been a very challenging year for us. We've still ended up with 3% GDP growth, which is not bad given everything else that happened in 2022. So that level of resilience, I think, is clear in the mind. And I've had a number of discussions, actually even today, just a couple of hours ago, with a major international company, just talked about that in terms of, because the way we are organized and the way our big domestic market, when the confidence is back, we really move very quickly vis-a-vis the rest of the world, actually. So, I think that there's absolutely no doubt about the resilience. We've gone through a few years of very difficult times, and people have seen how China, when we focus on doing something, we do it very fast and effectively. And there's no doubt.
But of course, international circumstances have changed much.
I think the biggest uncertainty, if you talk to the CEOs around the world today, and all of the ones that I've talked to, the major concern to them today, the first one is, right on top of their list, is geopolitical issues. And that's very difficult to control. And I think the world, whether it's businesses, whether it's government, whether it's individual organizations, we should focus on the major issues such as sustainability, which has no borders. And it requires everybody to cooperate and to work together. And hopefully we can all rise above politics and focus on doing the right thing for mankind.
I love that. But rhetorics seem to be at the center of the problems. The communications are becoming rhetorical rather than to communicate. So you are in the business of communication in a way. So how do you see a reality like this?
I think we should all step up. I mean, for example, I think the World Economic Forum this year, the theme is perfect. The theme is about cooperating in a fragmented world. How appropriate that is at times like this. And one of the ways to work together to cooperate in this fragmented world today is more communication. Is us stepping up in terms of engaging with others so that they have a better understanding, we have better communication.
Right.
Unfortunately, over the last 3 years, technology is wonderful. We're all on a virtual basis, we're on Zoom, but you don't have that human touch. And that's that lack, and when you don't have that human touch, you can't build trust. And in today's world, to me, the most important thing is for all of us to build more trust. And with more trust, you build more confidence. And with more confidence, people make more investments. And with more investments, economic activities grow.
And people's lives better.
Exactly.
Very simple logic, and yet just people don't get it. Having said that, though, communicators like you are facing a very challenging situation. On the one, for example, there are two opposing sides. You have to communicate to A about, in fact, B is not that bad. And communicate to B, well, A does remain some place for you to engage with. But this is difficult because you see the wall is getting ever closer to you. So how do you face situations like this? You talk about step up, right? You talk about step up and stand up.
Indeed, and one of the things that I always remind myself, and in fact at PwC, one of the things that because we operate across the world, and I've always said that we all need to be more multinodal. So understand each other's culture.
Indeed.
Respecting each other's position. And don't make an opinion about someone else's position because you're not in their position, right? So, and being able to operate in a multinodal world that we're in today is actually very important. So I don't challenge others in terms of their culture. And I try to respect them and try to operate within and trying to achieve the same objective. We may have a different approach,
right,
but nonetheless the objective is the same. A good example is climate risk. We all need to decarbonize, right? But that respect and that multinodal mindset is actually very important in today's world.
Raymond, I know you travel a lot, but of course over the past few years it's difficult. Now we are seeing friends, colleagues again. So how do you see this transition that China is going through right now? What would that mean, for the world to, some say, rediscover China, re-engage? Well, maybe not that accurate, but on the other hand, how do you see China is reawakening to the new situations in the world?
I think it's a journey. I think if you look back, 50 years ago and to 30 years ago with the opening up and to where we were 5-10 years ago, and we became the second largest economy in the world, is a journey we're going through. And I think it's very clear that the next 10 years is all about, where we've obviously done very well. And we've obviously been, with the opening up, we've done everything correct. In fact, I was talking to an Indian colleague before, and they just admire what we've done over the last 30 years, and we've had it right. And obviously we have a lot more geopolitical situations at this point, but nonetheless, I think India is trying to do exactly what we have done over the last 30 years. I think going forward, it's clear that we need to focus on that quality growth that we want to pursue going forward. It's no longer just focused on the quantity, and people talk about, the big topic is, our birth rate is down, for the first time, and so, our population has actually declined a bit. It's part of the journey. Obviously, with more technology, we're not just focusing on what we have done before, using a lot of labor to produce a lot of quantity. We're focusing on quality growth. We're investing into innovation. We're bringing technology into everything we do. It is a challenge, but it's part of the journey. And what we need to focus on the next 10 years is everything is about quality. China is about quality. And the fact is, we'll continue to be we are the second largest economy in the world, and we're going to have a big impact, and we're going to have a bigger say in the world stage as we move forward.
Raymund Chao, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
To you, Tian Wei.
And that's all the time we have for this special edition of World Insight on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum 2023. On behalf of my teams, both in Davos and in Beijing, thanks so much for being with us, and I'll see you tomorrow.